Skyrim was a truly massive game at its release, and to this day has the perfect scope for an open world game. It's got enough space to house different biomes and variety, but not too big to be worthless. It is easily one of the most successful games ever made, exploding in popularity alongside the rise of YouTube in the early 2010s. And when analyzed through a modern lens, Skyrim is overwhelmingly mediocre. Before Skyrim's release, the devs comment on wanting its three main ways to handle gameplay, being melee, magic, and thievery, to be the best ever.
We get ourselves in trouble by trying to make the ultimate fight dragons game, the ultimate be a warrior game, the ultimate mage game, and the ultimate thief game, and the ultimate assassination game, and the ultimate I'm picking plants.
Such ambition is not rare in the industry, but oh my god did they not succeed at this. The combat, all aspects of it, are terrible, and were dated 10 years at the game's release. Melee is worse than Dark Messiah, magic is worse than many games, and stealth is nowhere near as in-depth or fun as Chaos Theory or Thief. And, of course, the least interesting way to engage with the game is also the least balanced. Playing as a stealthy archer is overpowered as YouTube, and also extremely boring. Though it is very hard to try to criticize Skyrim because there's an ungodly amount of things to criticize, and if I do, it's inevitable that people will suggest a few dozen mods to fix whatever problems I bring up. After all, the two most modded games of all time are Skyrim and Skyrim but again. Frankly though, in the modern day, Skyrim's base mechanics being pretty awful doesn't matter that much. The world you inhabit is vast and teeming, leveling is enjoyable with a visceral sense of progression, the music is omnipresent and memorable, and any parts that you don't like can no doubt be changed, removed, or replaced. There are only a few parts of a game that, given sufficient modding tools, cannot be altered by fans. The balance, gameplay systems, and even something as huge as the world itself can be altered by those particularly dedicated and perhaps slightly clinically insane. The main plot, though, to change that, you must manifest the power necessary to rewrite the entire plot, recast all of the characters, direct their new voice work, design levels related to your new story beats, including enemy placement, repurposing old assets or making new ones, correctly placing triggers and loot, all while keeping that balanced and engaging while not differentiating too far from the original narrative. It's definitely not easy, and is the reason we typically see giant expansion mods completely divorced from the main game rather than remakes of existing content. Unfortunately for us all, Skyrim's main plot is not very good.
My analysis.
It centers around you, the Dragonborn. Their very existence borders on myth, the last one before you being so many generations ago. And yet, even though they wield the power to change the fate of entire nations and literally the world itself, they're barely acknowledged by anyone in the game, and there aren't enough guard dialogue overhauls in the world to fix it. You can, single-handedly, in the span of about 5 real-life minutes, obliterate the entirety of Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood sect, then walk up to a guard and go, "I killed all of the Dark Brotherhood." To give you a real-life analog, this is like if someone walked up to a US Army serviceman and said, "I killed Saddam Hussein." There should probably be parades held in your honor in all of the 6 holds, but instead he just goes, "Damn, nice," and hands you 3,000 gold and then tells you to get lost. And there's maybe one idle line of dialogue mentioning it. Hell, in the Dark Brotherhood questline, you literally kill the Emperor, and it has no lasting consequences past your payment for doing so. You can be an Imperial soldier, literally working for this guy, and still do this. You can't even tell the Brotherhood no unless you murder them at first sight. This may seem nitpicky, but the assassination of the Emperor was the catalyst for Oblivion's entire plot. You can be the Dragonborn, Slayer of the Eater of Worlds, the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, leader of the Companions, the Dark Brotherhood's lead assassin, master of the Thieves Guild, Thane of all 6 holds, and look like this! And this guy dressed in deer hide will still try to mug you for pocket change. It should probably go both ways, too. There's no real reason not to gank random passerbys for their shit, and that should be a major no-no for a mythical fantasy hero. Oh, hello, New Vegas reputation system, what is this footage doing here? Tragically, the act of fighting your namesake is also a terribly dull experience. I'll give it to Bethesda. The movement animations of the dragons convey a very impressive sense of weight and power, even if it can get a little silly. Unfortunately, there is none of this. The fights are far too long and pretty boring for everyone that isn't a mage with wards. It maybe wouldn't be so bad if it only took a few passes, but look at how goddamn tanky these things are. It feels like trying to destroy an Abrams with a pixie stick. Actually killing them grants the player dragon souls used to spend on shouts. They're simultaneously implemented terribly and one of the reasons for this game's widespread popularity. Word walls are the only ways to get shouts apart from a very few selection of scripted ones. Each shout is composed of 3 words, each word making its effects gradually more powerful. That's a lie, of course, the second word does basically nothing in almost every shout. The rewards of the walls are set, but as a player they might as well be random. Let's say you find a shout that you really like. The only way to get the other words for the shout are to try every word wall in the game until you get lucky, or to look up the location for it online. One of the only scripted shouts you get in the game is the funny ragdoll one. Skyrim came out at the end of 2011, and at this time, YouTube, this very platform, really started to take off. Skyrim took over the site alongside Minecraft throughout 2012, and so much of that success came from 2 sources. People shouting Lydia off the throat of the world, and Skyrim being buggier than an Amazonian anthill. I genuinely believe that if Skyrim wasn't one of the buggiest games I've ever played, it wouldn't have even remotely reached the heights of its popularity that it did. So much of the discourse around Skyrim and the videos about it, which are effectively free marketing from YouTube, were about how insanely buggy this game is. I believe this to be the reason that it hasn't really changed the company's ethos towards bugs, because they essentially mean free marketing and free discussion about your game. Also, because modders will fix them. Boy, does Bethesda love modders. They even want them to get paid so that Bethesda can take their money for no effort. Skyrim is nigh unplayable without 18 community patches to make the goddamn thing run at a base level. Not only are there ungodly amounts of engine issues, the scripting is about as solid as that pixie stick from before. Most games don't have a bug list on the wiki about 8 miles long for every single quest in the game. Conservative estimate, I'd say every 3rd quest has at least one bug that makes it uncompletable during certain circumstances. During this playthrough, I ran into about half a dozen bugs that forced me to use console commands to get past them. If you manage to 100% this game on console, you deserve a standing ovation. Quick disclaimer in case this gets brought up, all of the bugs that I'm mentioning here were listed and documented on the wiki. My mods did not cause them in any way. That is like so ridiculously unacceptable for any developer, but Bethesda just kinda ends up getting a pass because it's basically their identity at this point, as discussed earlier. Now, I didn't bring all of that up just to complain. It was to highlight that this game succeeded regardless of all of that, which I hope puts some backing behind the following. Skyrim's art and sound design is top fucking notch. Lots of fantasy settings, even including previous games in the series, model themselves after Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, and end up looking vaguely Anglo-centric Europe. You wouldn't know my wife, she went to a different continent. Skyrim was not this. It instead took their already established fantasy setting and took it to fantasy Norway. It's kind of funny how clearly this was a good idea and hadn't been done before or after. A lot of Tolkien's work even hinged on significant elements from pagan myth, so fantasy and the region are inherently linked. It's also an incredibly popular genre, and trying to find someone who doesn't like Vikings would be a goddamn challenge. Skyrim has this warrior culture entranced in a civil war and people freaking out about the motherfucking dragons returning. Not only is the region itself interesting, but the conflicts that are ongoing strike the perfect balance to make it feel like this is literally the end times, while not being too dire that it feels wrong not to rush the story. That civil war, though, it's not great. One side is the morally good side, and the other side is a bunch of wacko racists.
How'd you end up here?
I'm a true Nord. Simple as that.
The Stormcloaks are rebelling against the Empire for 2 reasons: to establish Nord supremacy and to kick the Thalmor out of the region. The Stormcloaks wanting to make the Nords great again has become way more uncomfortable in the last couple of years. Having the race that's the most coded to be the upright, strong Aryan men be the racists is a little... They also have a ghetto in their capital of all of the dark Elves. Really not being subtle about this, huh? I was gonna cover this topic in more detail, but like Bethesda, I ran out of time and I'm gonna cut the rest of it. To summarize, the Thalmor aren't present enough to establish their threat, and the Empire is objectively the better option morally, politically, and militarily. There isn't a set of armor or weapons in the entire game that felt out of place for me. Everything feels authentic and plausible and fits in with the world just as you'd expect it to. All of the holds are a cute portrayal of Nordic villages while still having variety. This same level of attention was given to the sound too. Pulling a sword out of its sheath, while maybe not realistic, sounds great. I shouldn't even have to mention the music. The sound of opening the game will probably manifest some memories for you of modding this game at 3 AM 8 years ago. Christ, I've been here a while, I need to wrap this up. Why have I played a lot of Skyrim? It's got an incredibly realized, expansive world and the largest modding scene ever twice over. As with many games that share its scope, a lot of its aspects fall flat, but it gets enough right with the potential for mods to fix the rest. Oh. And I love smithing. Seriously, it's a problem. If you want to play the game yourself after watching this mod is the only gameplay one I would recommend as truly essential. It's kind of hard for me to overstate just how bad Skyrim's vanilla combat is, and precision combined with a melee overhaul like Wildcat actually made it engaging for the first time in 10 years. Thanks for watching my video version of a 600 hours played game sucks Steam review.